Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm Sri, co-founder and co-host of the CPG Guys and co-founder and partner at Think Blue. Your key to unlocking your profitability potential. As builders, connectors, and amplifiers, we shape the future of commerce to drive your growth. Please do listen to my older daughter Ria Raj's music at www.riaraj.com. That's R-H-E-A-R-A-J. And follow my younger daughter Laura Raj as a member of the Geffen Records UMG Cat's Eye. While my wife Kavita Raj's own podcast, Lights Eye, Camera, Convo, and iHeartRadio on all streaming platforms. In June, hopefully all of us will have our very own broadcasting mechanism. Joining me today is Peter V.S. Bond, and he's not co-hosting this podcast. He serves as Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel, a division of Omnicom that helps enterprise brands improve their SEO and SEM, growing their e-commerce businesses. Mr. Bond, Dodgers Yankees are a few weeks away. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Sri, and I guess as this episode goes to air, we'll be preparing to head over in short order to the south of France for both of our first visits to the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity, along with a lot of our industry counterparts.
Here's what's comical about that. I had to leave a job in a C-suite role in branding in corporate America to be able to go to Cannes Lions. It's just fascinating.
Sri, wait a minute. You worked in the C-suite at a CPG company? How did our audience not know about that?
I have no idea why, Peter, but before we get to our guests, we want to ask.
Could be the paranoia of corporate communications.
I don't know. I'm not going to comment, but I'm just telling you, it took me to leave corporate America to get to Cannes Lions, and now we've got overwhelming response at Cannes Lions with multiple brands. It's just comical. Before we get to our guests, we want to ask you to help spread the word about this community we've created in the CPG Guys. Beyond sharing a podcast with your friends, if you're using it for Apple or Spotify as your preferred listening platform, leave us a rating as it helps feed the algorithm that makes us more findable by CPG retail people like you looking for education and entertainment. And more importantly, you shape the show. It also tells us if we got the right guests and the right conversations. We're happy that the CPG Guys is part of an impressive collective of highly rated podcasts, including CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer, and across the pond over the Atlantic, the FMCG Guys with Daniel, Efrain, and Christine. Finally, we're incredibly proud of our allyship with Next Up, whose mission is to advance the cause of women in business and to promote gender equality in the workplace. Next Up has terrific educational networking resources available to its members. I serve on the board of directors leading the development committee of Next Up. Links to our podcast, our sister cast, our landing page on Next Up, and the social media profiles of my daughters, Ria and Laura, my wife's podcast, may be found in the digital liner notes of this episode. So let's get this fun conversation going, one that I've been looking forward to. On this episode, we have a repeat guest and one that I have over the years followed closely and eagerly waited for insights and analytics from. I would eagerly wait for his white paper, statistics, tables, graphs, and of course I mentioned insights at Emarketer, then at Insider Intelligence, and now we continue to follow and learn from whatever his new company shares. I'm talking none other than the great Andrew Lipsman, who now has his own consulting company in e-commerce and omnichannel retail space. Andrew, welcome back to the CPG Guys.
Sri, Peter, so good to be back with you. I think I'm a third timer on the show, but like you, I will also be a first timer at Cannes. So I guess I also had to leave corporate America to make it to France for the first time.
Isn't that comical, Andrew? But maybe when we're together and we, I don't want to say cappuccino because that would be Italian, but when we share French coffee, we can have a debate about why that's the way things work themselves out. I just find it comical, though.
Welcome to the club, Andrew.
But Andrew, before we get started with our Q&A segment here, can you give us a quick overview of your new company and what you're up to?
Yeah, so the new company is called Media Ads and Commerce, and it refers to the three pillars of the retail media flywheel: media, advertising, and commerce. But at the same time, it's also a chance to widen the aperture on all things that are happening across the media, advertising, and commerce ecosystem. In this consultancy, I'm working with clients doing things predominantly on marketing strategy, go-to-market, and product strategy, particularly around measurement products. You all know I love measurement, so I like to get a little bit deep on that topic with some clients.
And it's not just the CPG guys, but there's an entire industry waiting for those very measurements. And more importantly, the analytic and insight reviews that you post after you get to those measurements. So thank you for that overview, Andrew. In the digital liner notes of this episode, we'll include links to your LinkedIn profile, your company's website for listeners to access while we go on with our conversation. So here we go with number one for you, Andrew. We always associated you with Emarketer. Like it was an automatic in my head. Oh, by the way, Andrew, this is his third visit. He's got 2 to get the famous leather jacket of the CPG Guys. 2 more to go at number 5. But Andrew, we always associated you with Emarketer and the great insights you provided. You're independent now like me. How's the difference working out for you?
It's been great. And it's a continuation of what I've been doing really for 20 years, which is content and insights development around measurement to help enable understanding of what's happening in the digital media, advertising, and commerce ecosystem. So, I get to put it under my own brand, which is fun and exciting, and go a little bit deeper into topics, when, without the specific cadence of a report schedule, for example. I get to kind of break off topics as I choose and decide how deep I'm going to get into each of them. And it's just been really fun and exciting to pursue a lot of those passions. And I love surfacing the insights that come out of that and bringing it to my audience.
Andrew, one of the comfort zones when we work for large corporations is we have access to unlimited data, it feels, on most days. Like, how do you go about that, seeking that today?
It's interesting. I've gotten the same question from a number of folks wondering that if I had special access to data, and of course, there's tremendous data within Emarketer. I think all people should probably subscribe to it because it really is an amazing resource. But I've always been somebody who has developed a muscle for going out and getting research. It's not just taking what's available around the market. It's really going and reaching into organizations. I come from market research. I was on the other side of those asks for data. So I kind of know what's under the hood in a lot of companies and know who to go to and how to go and get it and interrogate the data and figure out what's really going on. So that's a muscle I've developed over 20 years, and it's a continuation of that for me.
Andrew, welcome back to the show. As Sri mentioned, 2 more episodes. It's kind of like Saturday Night Live with the 5-timer smoking jacket. We give out a wonderful varsity leather jacket. So 2 more in the coveted leather jacket is yours, but that's not why we invited you today. Hardly a day goes by that there isn't something new happening in retail media. I woke up yesterday to find out that UNFI had launched its own retail media network as a wholesaler for its distributed retailer network. So, what from your perspective, what's new in retail media? What are you paying attention to that's got you kind of excited?
Yeah, I mean, I said going into the year that 2024 would be the year of moving up the funnel and into the store. So those are kind of the 2 broad themes. And I think the news of the year so far has to be the Walmart Vizio deal. Really significant, right? Walmart is really getting a lot of traction. Things are starting to hum in that ad business. And then they want to make a really smart strategic acquisition to get access to streaming TV inventory and extend their footprint into really high value inventory. Obviously, that sent shockwaves around the industry. And it really fit in nicely to what I wrote about it in my first article under Media Ads and Commerce, which was the Media Advertising and Commerce Flywheel. Every retail media network should be thinking about how they build their own flywheel. They've got the commerce, if they're a retailer. They've got the ads business now at this point. But the media piece is what most of them are missing or have maybe very few assets and need to think about how they acquire more assets or partner with media in order to get that. So Walmart makes a huge move. And then another piece of news more recently that I think is a continuation of this trend is the Best Buy CNET partnership. This is the first time that we've seen another major retailer partner, a really strategic partnership with a category adjacent digital publisher. I think I called it the first domino to fall, right? We are going to see a lot more of these partnerships. Ultimately, I think we're going to see some M&A activity around it where you will have retailers, RMNs actually going out and acquiring some of these digital publishers, especially when their valuations are a little bit lower than they have been historically. So there's a clear through line as to what's happening in the market today. And then in the backdrop of all this, you just continue to see all these major names partnering with each other. Walmart and Disney partnered. It seems like it's one after another between retailers and media companies partnering up.
Andrew, one follow-up. My question, you brought up the Walmart Vizio deal. Was it bold enough? Like, couldn't they have gone and just acquired Roku and really exploded their capability? I mean, it was a nice first step, but was it enough?
The question is, how much powder do they need to keep dry? Because the thing I'm kind of looking at is, can they make a bigger acquisition on the content side? Right? I mean, this gets access to a sales team, some inventory, obviously a TV operating system, but there's potential media companies out there, streaming media companies, which would be a much bigger play. So I kind of like the size of the current deal. I think it was a smart, strong move into the market, and there's still a lot of optionality for what they can do next.
Andrew, one of the big questions I had for you on this very topic of what's the hottest news. I mean, clearly the Vizio one is huge. The move to retail media now going back to store versus just being online. That's a big one. To support that, though, I feel most retail media networks are working very aggressively now on the offsite piece. Why the offsite piece? So that they can contribute better to household acquisition and have a full funnel 360 as opposed to just lower funnel as its primary. What have you seen in that offsite space, and do you agree?
Yes, I think it's a big opportunity. If you're a retail media network, you have to understand that your supply on site is constrained. And so you need to have a strategy to move off site long term anyway, if you want to keep growing and scaling. But beyond that, retail media, it's often, I think, pigeonholed into being purely performance media. And it is, listen, it's underpinned by closed loop targeting and measurement. That's a big part of the appeal, but that appeal can translate into upper funnel environments. So the thing we overlook oftentimes is that retail media's power comes in large part from better data. It's better than behavioral data. It's data on what people are shopping for and buying. So if you can enable that in those offsite environments, whether that's offsite programmatic, social, or streaming TV, then there's just a significant opportunity. And I think we're still in the early days, so it's actually a little bit messy. I actually hear a lot of CPG brands complaining about offsite media. I don't know if you hear this in your world, but they often say that the numbers don't pencil out on offsite media. And I say, well, what numbers are you looking at? I actually just wrote an article about it today. And it turns out they're measuring offsite media with conversions, ROAS, and click-throughs. And I'm like, those are the exact wrong metrics. It's not going to tell you how well that media is performing. What about incrementality? What about in-store sales? Those are not really on the radar.
You know, I'm reckoning that back to Andrew. That's what CPG brands and agencies are trained on, and they're going to stick to what they know as opposed to this new expanded horizon that we're looking at of 360 full funnel media from retail marketing. But you're dead right, though. The metric, you got to define the right metrics. And in that spirit, Andrew, you recently presented some provocative insights on incrementality at the Path to Purchase Future Forward Summit. Can you just decompose what you presented for our audience?
Yeah, so I presented alongside Sky Frontier, the SVP of Growth at Incremental, and much credit to Incremental here. They provided all the data that we analyzed and ultimately spoke about. It was, I think, some of the most fascinating research that I've ever gotten my hands into. What we did is we looked at what happens with different Amazon advertising formats for CPG brands in terms of incrementality compared to ROAS. So iROAS and ROAS metrics across sponsored products and sponsored brands. And what it turns out is that sponsored products tend to look very good in terms of ROAS. I think it was about $4.40 on average in the campaign study. So that pencils out pretty well, right? At least at a surface level. Sponsored brands are about half that, or even less in terms of ROAS. It looks a lot worse. And those are the metrics that today most brands are probably investing or optimizing against. If you look at it through the incrementality lens, from an iROAS lens, what you see is the exact opposite. Sponsored products gets much lower. I think it was about $1.70 or $1.80. And the incremental ROAS for sponsored brands goes up to about $2.30. So it's actually the better performing unit. Now, what's the why? If you decompose it further and you look at the keyword targeting tactics, what you find is, so for example, in sponsored products, if you do a sponsored product branded search, if you're buying against that keyword term, right, you're buying probably a lot of people who are going to buy your brand anyway. So the return on ad spend looks great. but the incrementality looks terrible, right? It's not really incremental sales. Those people were going to buy anyway. And guess what? E-commerce folks, they can juice their metrics. They all know this. You can juice your metrics by just buying your own terms. On the flip side of things, sponsored brands, specifically conquesting as a keyword targeting strategy, it's the most expensive way to acquire customers, right? It pencils out terribly from a ROAS perspective, but is by far the most effective from an incrementality perspective. And it makes sense. If you can peel off, it's expensive to peel off that customer, but if you can peel them off, the value that they represent to your brand being able to growth is significant. So it makes intuitive sense. And yet we continue to rely on these metrics that actually don't align with what CPG brands are trying to do, which is grow their incremental sales, right? It's about the P&L at the end of the day.
Andrew, let's look at one of the major marketplaces in the industry, Instacart. The IPO is well into the rearview mirror at this point. The stock's done pretty well, but what should we expect from Instacart, as we really haven't seen a substantial expansion in coverage the way we did, obviously, during the pandemic when they seemed to be adding a new retailer every other day. In fact, if anything, there's been kind of a decline in business. The big players are much more dedicated. The big retailers are dedicated to their own marketplace, direct to consumer offering, and not so much Instacart anymore. What's going on there?
I think Instacart is one of the most misunderstood retail media networks. I think the pandemic narrative really threw off everyone's thinking and understanding of Instacart. Right? It was one of the pandemic winners that had this surge. It was inevitable that growth would have to catch up with itself. So that's kind of what's happening, right? Things had to kind of normalize. We're in the normalization period for the core grocery buying behavior. I've seen this happen before, by the way. I go back to 2009 and Twitter. Twitter had this crazy hockey stick ascent when it first kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and then it flatlined for a bit. And then it started to have this more realistic growth curve. So I think Instacart is probably going to normalize and get to that more realistic underlying growth curve. Now, the ads business, this is the thing to understand. It is an ads business. Its valuation is tied to being an advertising business more than anything else. It's about 30% of their revenue. So for a substantial player to be at that high of a level of your revenue mix is significant. And it hasn't even tapped some of its biggest opportunities. So I think on its path to IPO, it really focused on the core marketplace, which was smart. And that monetization, I think, is humming pretty nicely. It waited much longer than other RMNs to go up the funnel and start inking these partnerships. They started to do it in rapid succession, whether it's Google, whether it's Roku, whether it's NBCU. So they've got these nice partnerships that haven't started to really materialize into the business yet, but they will. And then I think that the big thing that's sitting out there is their potential in in-store media, right? They are starting to build the apparatus around smart carts first, but really because they are partnered with so many regional grocers who are going to need help digitizing their store experience and monetizing through advertising, that to me, that's a mega opportunity that's probably a few years away, but as it materializes, I think is a complete game changer.
A reminder to audience, I'm speaking to none other than Andrew Lipsman, an independent e-commerce and omnichannel expert and consultant. You can find his company details in the digital liner notes of this podcast, as well as in the LinkedIn post made today on the CPG Guys. Hey, so Amazon Fresh is next. For a while, there were no new stores, like a year and a half or so. It seems like they lost their way, and then they're talking about new stores one more time publicly. And it's not like one store. It's like pretty big bunch that they're talking about. But this just seems to be a wacky teeter-totter. If grocery is to be figured out, it's through Fresh. It's not through the core platform, given the cost of fulfillment. What to make of this?
Amazon has to figure out grocery, and they're trying to do it. And it's not an easy business. And even with the learnings from Whole Foods, trying to build a new grocery store concept with different types of brands, it's a very different experience from the ground up. There's learnings along the way. And so they're clearly tweaking the model. They're hitting pause. I think when they stopped and said that they were moving away from the Amazon Go technology, the just walk out and things like that, there's always this impulse to think that Amazon is going to walk away from physical grocery. Not a chance. They have to have conviction about this long term, and they are going to figure it out. They actually just unveiled a few newer stores. I think both within about 30 or 40 minutes of me. I need to make a trip out to them to see what they've learned from the initial store experience, which just wasn't quite up to par for most people's expectations. But it's all about advertising, right? This is where so much CPG shopping happens. It's where the data is going to come from that's going to fuel their advertising flywheel. So they need to get it right, and they're going to. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get there. And, I look at it with the core competition with a Walmart or a Target or a Kroger, and I say, this is their time to shine, right? We're moving into this next phase of retail media, and it's where brick and mortar retailers actually can lean into their competitive advantage while Amazon figures it out. And then once they figure out, it's going to take some time to get up to, 300 stores, 500 stores, whatever that magic number is before they really get that rich data to power the advertising experience.
But at the same time, Andrew, Walmart just announced its latest numbers, and its grocery e-commerce business was through the roof. So my question to you related to this is, while they focus on trying to play catch up to where Walmart already has tremendous brick and mortar footprint and are really starting to eat into Amazon's e-commerce dominance, you see Amazon make an announcement like they're now introducing Lucky Supermarkets as a storefront within Amazon. Is that just like a multi-pronged approach to try and stave off the challenge that Walmart's got going on with them? Like, what's the picture here, the bigger picture for Amazon?
The big picture, if I distill it down, it is physical grocery. I mean, they're always going to be able to be a strong player in e-commerce, in grocery e-commerce. But yeah, they have strong competition. Walmart and Amazon oftentimes is looked at as a zero-sum game, and I would say it actually isn't. They make each other better. They are fierce competitors. They both have strengths. Historically, by trying to compete with the other one, ends up being much better at what they're trying to do. So I think they both have ended up being winners over this last period of time. I think that's going to continue to be the case. And it creates this urgency for Walmart to keep getting better on e-commerce. And they have, right? They've come a long way. They were kind of laggard for a while. And then Amazon similarly, hasn't yet figured out physical grocery, but they have a lot of incentive to, and they're going to.
So let's talk a little bit more about Walmart, and specifically Walmart Connect. I think at this point we talked a little bit about Vizio and how that gives them a streaming television connection to their tech stack. I think at this point we can probably all agree that Walmart's ad units make them full funnel in terms of their appeal. My question is this: what's it going to take beyond what they've already done for brands to really think of Walmart Connect as a national media platform and not just let it be a trade managed activity? Because it still is in many, many cases. Most major manufacturers treat Amazon as a national media asset and tend to run it out of headquarters, but not Walmart so much. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, there's a certain organizational stasis that is predisposed to kind of lock into how they've worked with the retailer in the past, right? So that's the context for how brands tend to look at everything with physical store retailers, right? They get caught in this JBP view of the world, and it's a zero-sum game, and it's actually not a very productive mindset. So I'm really trying to get retailers and brands to collectively pick up their heads, look at the big picture here, which is that retail media is a $60 billion opportunity over the next 4 years or so. They all can gain in this. Marketers can market better through full funnel advertising powered by better data, and retailers can get incremental dollars if they play their cards right. We're starting to see some early signs of this, but the organizations are really not architected to take advantage of this opportunity. To your point about national media, that's what I want to see happen. I'm really trying to argue for national budgets to start to move and flow into the upper funnel environments and in store. I just had a conversation with a major CPG brand earlier this week, and I talked about in-store advertising And they went right to the performance conversation. And I said, no, it's not performance. It's TV. Think of it as TV. It is a large scale brand advertising platform. It's about reach, quality, and performance in that order, right? The performance is going to be there, but think about the reach and the quality and the advertising experience and the ability to reach shoppers who you can't reach through TV, linear TV anymore. But I've talked to a lot of CPG brands and they're not thinking that way yet. And they also don't have somebody who owns the strategy around in-store media. So the conversation needs to move into upper funnel, but the organizations need to start putting somebody with ownership over that. One last point here, because I just talked to a room of about 20 CPGs, and they started introducing themselves and going around the room. And the first few had Omni in their title. And I go, wait, hold on a second. How many of you have Omni in your title? And like 17 of 20 hands went up. All right. So I was like, you have Omni in your title. Who here is actually like responsible or owns in-store media as a marketing tactic? And it was kind of like looking around at the other person. So there's Omni in the title, but actually not in their responsibility. And the organizations just have yet to focus on it, but they should, because there's an arbitrage opportunity. This is where you make money, is by being ahead of the curve in new advertising channels. You got to have a little bit of conviction around it, though.
You're making me laugh today, Andrew. I didn't know entertainment was part of this conversation today, but yeah, that word omnichannel is completely misused. To be honest with you, we hashtag omnichannel retail here on the CPG Guys, but maybe, Andrew, if we asked you, are we qualified? Maybe you'd say, yes, we are. I don't know. Are the CPG Guys qualified to say omnichannel? I'm just kidding.
I think so. You talk about these issues, right, in a way that is agnostic and I think is not set purely in the e-commerce context, which is what's needed.
I'm just kidding, Andrew. But that said, right, the in-store media one is, to me, a puzzle for most large brands because they've never encountered it before, right? They think of display and feature support as the primary vehicle for traffic, but that has entirely been associated only with conversion. That's the only metric that display and feature really contributes to. No one's asking what foot traffic passed by for feature and display. Though I'd argue 30 years ago, some wise human being, man or woman, should have figured out that every single display or end cap is also like TV. Traffic passes by and you got to count the impressions. That actually matters. And not every retailer is created the same with that traffic either. And that was never done in the first place. So it's a glaring error due to which this confusion happens. I'm glad you actually challenged the use of the word omnichannel, because I would say the exact same thing. Stop the nonsense and just take accountability for what you're responsible for, and then appoint somebody to do the rest. Like, don't try to hoard it all and try to be the expert when you don't have the expertise. And now Peter's looking at me and he's got a little grin up his head because he's like, look what happens when he leaves corporate America. He speaks his mind.
No, I love the fact that your POV is strong. Like, Andrew, on this in-store thing, I have my point of view, particularly around Amazon Fresh and their decision to abandon the just walk out technology. I've always believed that it's not really suitable for a large format store because there's just too much going on, and there's too much human intervention that needs to take place in terms of validation in a very tight margined environment that just doesn't make it economically feasible. But then they turn and they go to the dash cart. And my question is this, like, that's a huge capital investment. Plus there's this massive friction. And Sri and I found this out when we went and walked into the store. Like, you can't leave the physical store with a dash cart. I mean, you will be physically accosted by one of the associates there saying, no, you have to switch. And the minute I have to take my groceries out of one cart and put it into another just to walk out to the parking lot, like, why didn't they go the route of Walmart with Scan and Go in their physical stores, where the burden of the capital investment is borne by the consumer in their mobile app? Like, what's going on there with the in-store? I think there's a lot of friction and not a lot of people thinking about what the logical outcome of this is.
There is friction. There are logistical hurdles, right? The smart carts are bigger in format. They don't stack into each other necessarily. So these are some of the kinks that have had to be worked out. I think a lot of them will get worked out. There's probably ways to, provide some security around carts so you can take it into the parking lot. In long term, I think for that use case, it probably is the right play. It's better than having hundreds of cameras coming from the ceiling, which if you walk into an Amazon Fresh, it's not very inviting, right? I think they understand now that the store experience, it has to have that warmer feel, that human component to it. And
I feel like I'm on Big Brother when I'm in an Amazon Fresh store with all these cameras looking at me everywhere.
Good to realize
exactly.
that it's not working, right? And so now is the retooling. I also think there's also this jump to think that you have to know every SKU and know every data point. And like I say with in-store media, it's a scaled media channel. You need some counting, you need some media metrics around it, but not everything has to be personalized, nor should it be. And then it should be opt-in. So there are consumers. Actually, there was some interesting research that looked at the different types of screens and how consumers responded to it. And the Smart Cart had the highest percentage of positive, very little neutral, and some fairly high negatives too. So some people are just like, I don't want a Smart Cart at all. Get it away from me. But a lot of people, and I think probably a lot of coupon shoppers, are like, I want to be able to plug in my loyalty. I want to be able to coupon shop. So there is a lot of utility. So I think that's the right way to think about it, is provide that offering for people who want it, and then other people can just easily opt out.
Andrew, I'm going to stay in that in-store space a little bit more with you here, because I do strongly believe, as you've kind of put it out there, that the next chapter of retail media, there's going to be some offsite, but I'm not so sure the retail media networks have enough inventory and partnerships to really drive the offsite to the fullest extent. And then CPG is making this fatal error of, at really anchoring its offsite based on ROAS. So it's still work in progress, but even more work in progress, or very early innings, maybe like just the warm up in a baseball game, is this notion of in-store retail media. Let's jump back in that, right? Who's got the best capabilities in in-store retail media? Is anyone really muscling up there? And when that actually starts muscling up, I got to imagine the traffic that stores are going to show from in-store retail media is far going to triumph what their website is going to have. So are we going to see a flip here, upside down change of the curve here?
Well, to the traffic point, yes, the audiences on average are much bigger, right? We shared, I think the last time I was on your show, we talked about how audiences were on average about 70% bigger in store. If you get into regional grocery, it's probably way, way bigger. You're talking about multiples of their traffic. So I think as for who's doing it well, let's look to Europe. So Europe is a decade ahead of the US in doing in-store retail media, and they're doing it well. They're measuring it well. And I think we need to learn from what they've done and start doing it better. The grocer to look at is Tesco. They're starting to roll out digital end caps. They're doing really high quality experiences. I think they're rolling it out the right way. And if I were major retailers here in the US, I would be looking at that as a good example. We're seeing more experimentation, though. Obviously, Walmart has sent up a strong signal of their move into in-store retail media. We saw Kroger roll out cooler screens. We saw Hy-Vee invest in 10,000 digital screens. So it's happening. This is happening in a significant way now. We're going to see it rolling out more and more. And it's about, I think, how do you remove the friction for retailers to get into the store more easily? Start with some easy no-brainer screens, right? The digital end cap is really powerful, but it's also a lot more complex. So maybe start with things like front of store and things that you can introduce in a much easier way. That'll help this market start to take off a bit more. Lastly, measurement is a critical piece. It's not there yet. I've said we need a Nielsen TV ratings for in-store. That is what's going to help tap national media investment. So there's some really good innovations that are starting to happen. I'm excited about where we're at, but that needs to lock into place to really tap those budgets in a much bigger way.
Should we be therefore, Andrew, telling the Nielsen IQ folks, hey, we need a measurement technique for in-store retail media?
I was going to say Arthur Nielsen just perked up in his grave. He's like, wait, another opportunity for market measurement? This is big.
My call out is to Kim Cox, who heads the full view measurement, that this needs to be a part of the future and planning. And I think this is like untapped white space for Nielsen IQ in this space.
Andrew, my follow-up on this is to get the screens in store, is this a capital investment that many retailers will make themselves, or is this really through partnerships with companies like StrataCash and Barrows and Grocery TV that are going to bring that in? Is that the only way it's going to happen? Or is that, yeah, that's true for all the mid and small market, but the big players are going to probably lay out some money themselves? Like, what's the path to deployment at scale of digital screens for in-store retail media?
The short answer is that retailers are allergic to CapEx, even the biggest ones. They have a little bit more resource, so you'll probably see them doing some of it. But when they can rely on others for the CapEx, they will take it. And to me, it almost seems crazy. It's like, you should take on that CapEx if you can, because the long-term value of the revenue share on advertising revenue is going to be so much more powerful. And yet they don't do that. They will say, nope, you can take a better revenue share as long as you take on the CapEx. So it is what it is. It's a real impediment to this. I always say that the two biggest inhibitors to really ratcheting up in-store retail media are CapEx and CX.
But Peter, on that CapEx front and the in-store that we've just discussed here at length, do you know a gentleman called Marlo Nickel? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Marlo is at Grocery TV, and he's been very focused, like some of our other guests, on building out those digital screens. And I know Andrew mentioned cooler screens. I think they've gotten past the problem of some of the door screens catching on fire. When you're not a physical hazard to the store, you're much more appealing to a retailer. I'm just kidding, people. That's just a joke. Please don't anybody come at us. But in any event,
Marlo and I just co-authored an article together in work about how brands grow with in-store ads. And what we're trying to do, we are very aligned in our thinking that this is a branding upper funnel medium first and foremost. And you need to think about how in-store ads do everything that Professor Sharp says you should do. It grows reach, and it creates mental and physical availability for your brands. It ticks all the boxes.
Hallelujah. Andrew said it on the CPG Guys first.
Listen to Andrew.
The in-store media opportunity is upper funnel, brand acquisition, new to brand, new to household, things of that.
All right, Andrew, let me close this out with you, looking towards there's a massive amount of transformation already going on in the immediate future. A little bit more long term, what is going to be transformative about this space? Is fragmentation going to be addressed? Are we going to see standardization of ad units, of measurement? Like, what needs to really transform in the short run to make retail media what Kara Pratt at 8451 has always said, which is it's media?
I'm really excited about the innovation that is happening on measurement. Measurement is the most powerful force that drives advertising investment, digital advertising investment, and it has to get better. It has to move towards incrementality, and it has to measure the physical store. There are really exciting things that are happening on every front, whether it's audience measurement, closing the loop on in-store sales, and better versions of incrementality measurements. You talk about standardization, it comes up all the time. I think it's a worthy thing to aspire to, but it's always inherently a cat herding exercise, right? And you have to try and coordinate every retailer or every media seller around those standards. It's going to happen. It's going to serve a functional purpose, but third-party measurement solves for all of that. If you have sound third-party measurement that you can apply across everyone on the buy and the sell side, that makes markets. So that to me is the most immediate solve. I'd rather see the industry coalesce around some of those third-party measurements for in-store audience measurement, incrementality, things of that nature. I think that's what's going to really unlock so much more, tens and tens of billions of dollars over the next several years.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Andrew. Let me remind our audience that you can find all of our content on the URL cpgguys.com. That easy. If you think you or your company has some thought leadership, just like Andrew did, to contribute to our community dialogue, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that's contact@cpgguys.com. And maybe you can join us on the podcast. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the navigation bar all the way up top. Thank you for the 31,000 plus followers we have on LinkedIn. Without you, this podcast doesn't exist. Thank you for the clicks, likes, direct messages, the polls that you take, and for telling us what conversations you'd like to have, which guests you'd like to have. Andrew, I can't thank you enough for doing this on short notice and adjusting to my idiosyncrasies of trying to reschedule on the fly. So sincerely, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. You all originated retail media swag. I love retail media swag.
Hey!
So I think we need to do a jersey swap here one of these days. Maybe in Cannes.
I think that's a must, Andrew. Jersey swaps. I like that.
And Andrew and I also been talking about the CPG guys and Andrew working together out here in the future. Y'all can expect much more content from Andrew right here on the CPG guys platform. More to come on that. We'll be announcing that shortly. Peter, we do have time to do a quick summary. Do you want to tell us the 3 or 4 big highlights here that Andrew referred to?
Sure. From my perspective, Andrew really highlighted the fact that in-store media presents a tremendous opportunity for growth and to replace other mechanisms of upper funnel awareness that previously had resonation, but doesn't really anymore, notably linear television and to some degree print advertising. But it also requires advertisers to think about how to measure it differently than they currently are. I also heard very clearly that measurement is a critical component. And once everybody's comfortable with the ability, particularly of third parties, either third party entities or even from my perspective, clean rooms, to be able to access and then define your own measurement system, it'll allow manufacturers to be more comfortable about comparing performance from one platform to another. And there's a lot of activity going on in the marketplaces. Amazon's trying to figure out what it's doing, particularly in brick and mortar. Walmart's got brick and mortar down pretty well. They're trying to think about how to make their tech stack and their ad products more full funnel. And Instacart in general is a very misunderstood platform. I think as advertisers start to understand what each of these platforms does, they can invest more judiciously and frankly more successfully against all of them. But so much more to come in this particular market niche. It's just an exciting time to be part of that, Sri.
Peter, thank you so much for that quick wrap up. It's a pleasure doing this podcast with you week over week. Thank you for joining me, Peter, as always.
Yep.
That's a wrap of this episode. We will see you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys, LLC, or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys, LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys, LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys, LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.